Hey everybody, it's Mr. Choppa here. So the reason why you're watching this video is probably because you're having trouble understanding how a phylogenetic tree works or classification in general. So follow along with me as we go through this worksheet so you can get some answers to your questions and hopefully it makes more sense by the end of it. So please read along with me as I go. What is a cladogram? It is a diagram that depicts evolutionary relationships among groups that is based on phylogeny, which is a study of evolutionary relationships. Sometimes a cladogram is called a phylogenetic tree, though technically there are minor differences between the two. In the past, biologists would group organisms based solely on their physical appearances. Today, with the advances in genetics and biochemistry, biologists can look more closely at individuals to discover their patterns of evolution and group them accordingly. This strategy is called evolutionary classification. Cladistics is a form of analysis that looks at features of organisms that are considered innovations or newer features that serve some common purpose. Think about what the word innovation means in regular language. These characteristics appear in later organisms but not earlier ones and are called derived characters. So what we're going to do now is we're going to fill out this character matrix. So we're going to be marking an X if the organism has that trait, and we're going to leave it blank if the organism does not have that trait. So as we're doing this matrix and the rest of this activity, I will be saying pause often because I want you to pause the video to think about the answer before I provide you with an answer and explanation. So we'll do this first one as an example. Worm, does it have cells? Pause. So now I want you to think about it, pause the video and think about it. And then once you have an answer, play the video again so you can actually figure out what the answer is. So, worms, do they have cells? Pause. Yes, worms do in fact have cells. So let's mark it with an X. All right, spiders, do they have cells? Pause. Spiders in fact do have cells. A carpenter ant. Pause. Yes, carpenter ants do in fact have cells as well. A housefly. Pause. Yes, houseflies do indeed have cells as well. There we go. And a dragonfly. Pause. Yes, dragonflies do have cells. All right, now we're going to move on to legs. We're going to see whether or not these organisms have legs. A worm. Do worms have legs? Pause. No, worms do not have legs. So we're going to leave that one blank. A spider. Does it have legs? Pause. Yes, spiders have 8 legs. A carpenter ant. Pause. Yes, carpenter ants do in fact have legs. A housefly. Pause. Yes, houseflies do in fact have legs. And last, a dragonfly. Pause. Yes, dragonflies have legs. So all but worms have legs. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Alrighty then, so now we're going to look at antennas. This is going to be slightly difficult, so think about it before you give me an answer. Worms. Do worms have antennas? Pause. No, worms do not have an antenna, so we're going to leave that blank. What about a spider? Do spiders have antenna? Pause. Nope, spiders do not have antennas. What about a carpenter ant? Pause. Yes, carpenter ants do in fact have antenna, so we're going to put an X there. Oh, sorry about that. Wrong area. So let's just fix that really quickly. There we go. Perfect. All right. Housefly. Does a housefly have antennas? Pause. Yes, houseflies do in fact have antennas. All right. Dragonfly. Do dragonflies have antenna? Yes, dragonflies do in fact have antenna. So I'm starting to see a pattern here. Are you able to see a pattern? We'll see for this next one if you can understand the pattern a lot better. Wings. Now we're going to focus on wings. Do worms have wings? Pause. No, worms do not have wings. A spider. Do spiders have wings? Pause. Nope, spiders do not have wings. A carpenter ant. Do carpenter ants have wings? Pause. Nope, carpenter ants do not have wings. A housefly. Do houseflies have wings? Yes, houseflies do in fact have wings. So let's put an X on houseflies. All right, last one. Dragonflies. Do dragonflies have wings? Pause. Yes, dragonflies do have wings. All right, now we're going to move on to our last set of characteristics. 2 sets of wings. So let's do these. Worms. Do worms have 2 sets of wings? Pause. No, of course not. If they don't have 1 set of wings, why would they have 2 sets of wings? So then by process of elimination, we know that the ones that don't have wings are not going to have 2 sets of wings. So we could just skip those 3 first ones and we can move on straight to the dragonfly. So does a housefly. Houseflies, do they have 2 sets of wings? Pause. Nope. Houseflies only have 1 set of wings. So houseflies do not have a set of wings, 2 sets of wings. So let's move on to a dragonfly. Does a dragonfly have 2 sets of wings? Pause. Yes, dragonflies do in fact have 2 sets of wings. Great. So now let's move on to the next characteristics. So now in the box below, we are actually going to create a cladogram. Should be simple enough, right? So the way you create a cladogram, it didn't look sort of like a tree. So let's get this a little bit more showing. Perfect. All right, so I'll use a line going from the bottom left to go all the way to the tippity top. Perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we work with what we got. All right, so now we're actually going to include our organisms into this tree. So based on our characteristics, we're going to have to figure out which one occurred first. So which characteristic do we know occurred first? Pause. Cells. Cells are the first things that showed up. How do you know this? Because if you look at each of these single characteristics, right here, you can see that each of these organisms, the worm, the spider, the ant, housefly, and the dragonfly, all have cells. So we know that was the first characteristic that showed up in the tree. So we're going to mark cells at the very bottom of our tree. There we go. Perfect. So now let's put our first organism. What is our first organism that showed up? It's going to be the most simplest one. So a worm has the least characteristics present, so we know that they're going to be the first ones. So then we're going to put a worm first. So now what we can do is we can include our next characteristic. Let's take a look. What is our next characteristic? Legs. So we know that legs showed up after the worm. So we're not going to put legs before where cells are, because if we put cells in this area, then that means that the worm would also have that characteristic. But we know worms do not have legs, so we're going to put it after worms. So let's do that. So now we know that legs are the next characteristic. Which organism is going to follow? Pause. The spider. Since the spider is the next developed organism, we're going to know spiders are going to be the next up in our tree. So what is our next characteristic following legs? Antennas. As you can see at the very top in the table, you see antennas are the next in line. So, did spiders have antennas? Pause. No, spiders do not have antennas, so we know that characteristic evolved after spiders. So the same thing that we did with legs, we're going to do the same thing with antennas. And what is the first organism that developed antennas? Carpenter ants. So let's put carpenter ants next up in our tree. All right, so what is our next trait? Wings. Did carpenter ants have wings? Pause. No, carpenter ants did not have wings. So we know that trait developed after ants. So let's put that trait after our ants. And who was the first organism that had wings? Houseflies. So we're going to put houseflies right after wings. So now, who can tell me or think about it? What is a characteristic after wings? 2 sets of wings. And as we already figured out, flies do not have 2 sets of wings. So we know that characteristic developed after houseflies. So that's going to go right after houseflies. 2 sets of wings. And what is the only organism that we know that had 2 sets of wings? Dragonflies. So dragonflies are going to go at the very end of our table. There we go. Dragonflies. So this is our phylogenetic tree. So hopefully now it makes a little bit more sense, but we're going to go into a little bit more detail so you can understand how to actually analyze and interpret trees like this. So as we know, cells were the first characteristic to develop. So we know since cells are at the very, very beginning, we know everything after cells, every organism after cells possesses that trait. Because it's at the very end or at the very beginning, depends on how you're looking at it, it's the first trait to develop, which means it's the trait that all other organisms have. So what's the next developed trait? Legs. We know that everything after the worm has legs. So everything after cells and legs is going to have cells and legs. We know that worms are before legs, so we know worms do not have legs at all. Same thing if we jump forward to wings. We already know which 2 organisms have wings because we know the ones after the characteristics are the ones that have that trait. So we know everything after wings has wings. So the housefly and dragonfly. But we know everything before that trait does not have it. So carpenter ants, spiders, and worms do not have wings. So hopefully this made a little bit more sense and you were all able to understand it. Hopefully the phylogenetic tree assignment makes a little bit more sense now that you know how to interpret and analyze trees. If you have any more questions, please contact me as soon as you can or email me, send me a message, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.